missed that train. Oh, I'd go back there and wring that fool boy's neck. Sorry, that sounded terrible, didn't it? I'm a nurse over at the Wyoming County Community Hospital, and the Johnson's boy decided to take his daddy's tractor for a little joyride this afternoon and broke his fool arm, which made me late, which meant I missed the train to New York. It's okay. There's another train. Which is, I'm sure, evidenced by the fact that you folks are here. Y'all, I'm assuming you are all headed down to New York City to meet the fleet coming in?
Sure.
Well, with so many ladies in the group, I'm assuming that. Well, yeah. You're all headed down to pick up the husbands or your sweethearts. Mm-hmm. Yes?
Yes.
Who you heading down to pick up?
My darling Sean.
Your husband?
Yes.
How did you two meet?
Oh, you don't want to.
Yeah, some stories of how those of us who are married met our significant others are more interesting than others. Oh, I'm so sorry. How rude of me. I didn't introduce myself. My name is Phyllis Howe Drennan. As I said, I'm a nurse over at the Wyoming County Hospital. And actually, the story of how I met my husband, Walt, who I'm on my way down to meet as the fleet comes in, is kind of funny given that I work in a hospital, because that's where we met. His mama had come in for surgery, back in 40, about 5 years ago. And, well, I'm sure you all know this, but she had to spend 10 days in the hospital, because any surgery, you'd have to spend at least 10 days in recovery. And during those 10 days, I happened to be her nurse. And after she was discharged, it was funny. Now, when I tell you the rest of this, you have to promise me something. You can't, if you see Walt and I on the train back, you can't tell him I told you this part. After his mama was discharged, Walt wrote me a letter, and it was a beautiful letter, and it said, I hope I'm not being too forward, but when you were taking such good care of my mama, I was just taken with you, and I was hoping that I could start corresponding with you. Well, the part you can't tell Walt about is that when I wrote him back, I asked him for a picture. I said, sure, we can exchange letters, but I need a picture of you. Now, if you ask Walt, to this day, he will tell you that I was just so taken with him that I wanted a picture right away. The truth of the matter is, I take care of hundreds of people. I had no idea who he was. So, I did get the picture. He was rather attractive, and I enjoyed his letters. So after corresponding for a few months, I let him take me out, and as they say, the rest is history. Seems so long ago. It's only 5 years, but it seems forever ago. Well, we married in April of 41, and Walt actually, he joined the Army. What branch of service is your husband
Army.
in? Oh, he's in the Army as well. Maybe they know each other. Oh, what about you? What branch of service is your husband in? Oh, he's in the Army too. Well, who knows? Maybe they all know each other. Well, I'll tell you, Walt actually joined. Was your husband drafted, or did he join up before the war? Oh, they may know each other then, because Walt actually joined not long after we were married, before the war actually broke out for Americans, anyway. I wasn't real keen on the idea of him joining because, well, there was already a war going on in Europe, and I was worried we were going to get drawn in, as I'm sure you were as well. But he was insistent. And of course, everything changed in December. You know how there are those moments in your life that you can recall with absolute crystal clarity? Well, I remember. I was driving home. I worked the late shift. And all of a sudden the news came on the radio in the car. A day that will live in infamy. Yeah, I almost drove off the road. Not just because of Walt, but I didn't mention I also have a brother. He's with the Army Air Corps. He was stationed out at Wheeler Field in Hawaii. I'm sure you all have heard what happened out at Wheeler Field. 3/4 of the planes didn't even make it off the ground. There were reports, early reports, that everybody was dead. I thought we lost Jack. As I said, I can remember that moment with crystal clarity. But my family was actually one of the lucky ones. A few days later, we got a call, and it was Jack. Thank God. And he said that he was fine, and not to tell my mama, but the planes, when they came in, were flying so low that he actually was able to draw his sidearm and fire the planes and hit them. They were coming in so low. Well, Jack's still over in, well, you know how they edit the mail, but last I heard, Jack was in Paris. So I'm hoping that Walt might have some news, because I know Walt was in Paris for a while. I'm hoping maybe they saw each other. Anyway. You know what's really funny? Any of you ladies have men in the Navy? Since we're heading down to meet the fleet? Soon, at least a few of you. Well, after the attack on Pearl Harbor, Walt decided that he thought that he should change his commission from the Army to the Navy, because the Navy lost so many men. And when he got home from the recruiting office, I will never forget the look on his face. I don't think I have ever seen him so mad in my entire life. Walt came storming in, and he just throws down his keys, and I said to him, what's wrong? And he said, I don't know what those fool people are doing. And I said, okay, Walt, I'm going to need a little more than that. And he said, well, I went into the recruiting office, and I told them I wanted to switch my commission. Yes? Well, they told me I couldn't because of my medical file. I said, your medical file? What was in your medical file? Those darn fool officers said I couldn't serve on a Navy ship because I'm colorblind. I said, well, what does that have to do with anything? And he said, that's exactly what I asked them. And he said their response was that because he was colorblind, he couldn't see the different colors on the medicine bottles. Then I said, well, what'd you say to him, Walt? He said, I told him I could read just fine. So, anyway, Walt's been in the Army for the last 4 years instead. He started his service down at Walter Reed at the medical center there. I was thrilled. Out of the line of fire, within a train ride. I'll tell you, I even thought about moving down there to Washington, D.C. To be with him. Now, ma'am, have you been to Washington?
Yes.
You ever been there in August?
Next month I will be.
Well, then I'll warn you. I went down there for a week in August. I am never going back. It is so darn hot. I told Wallace I can't move here. Not if the summers were like this. So I went back and I stayed up in, well, I live in Warsaw, little tiny town. I don't know if you're familiar with it. Most of y'all are probably from around Rochester, but it's a little tiny postage stamp town. But went back up there and I stayed there. Walt was at Walter Reed, as I said, and then, oh my, it must have been the fall of '43. I had a phone call. Walt said, I'm in New York City. I need you to get on a train and come down. We ship out in 48 hours. And we got leave till then. So I got somebody to cover my nursing shift, and I jumped on a train, and almost didn't make it. I seem to have really bad luck with trains. I don't know if any of you have done this, but turns out I got on the train that went into New Jersey instead of New York. And it is not that easy to get from New Jersey to New York. So, as luck would have it, I ran into a friend's brother on the train, and he offered me a ride, thank goodness. And I got to Times Square, and I checked into the hotel that Walt and I had agreed upon, and I waited for him, and I waited for him, and I waited for him. Never came. Took 2, maybe 3 days before I got the letter. Sorry, dear. All leave's been canceled. We're shipping out tonight. I know you're not going to get this because you've already gotten on the train. So, I never did get to say goodbye. That was just heartbreaking, knowing that he was going into a war zone and I didn't even get to say goodbye. I'm sure a lot of you ladies have dealt with the same thing. Most of the time, we don't know when they're going to ship out. So, anyway, they kept in touch as much as he can on the front. I don't know if I mentioned this. Walt, he doesn't tell me a lot about what's going on, and I think it's because they call him orderlies, but he works with the ambulance crews, shuttling men from the front to behind the lines for treatment. I don't know what he's seeing, but he always sounds upbeat in his letters. Well, I'll stop being so melancholy. I'm just happy he's home. I just hope he doesn't have to ship out again, what with the fighting still going on in the Pacific. Well, just like you all, I'm sure I have not been wasting the last couple of years either. I haven't been sitting on my hands or anything. Are any of you from around Warsaw? Are you familiar with the Wyoming County Hospital? Oh, well then you probably saw the article in the newspaper. Wyoming County Hospital was actually chosen as one of the hospitals, our little tiny hospital, was chosen as one of the hospitals to host the training classes for this new Army nurse corps that they're putting together. Can you imagine our little tiny hospital? Well, so for the last 2 years, I've actually been working with them. When they first started, the head nurse came to me and she asked me if I wanted to become a teacher for the Army Nurse Corps, and I don't think I'm much of a teacher. I don't know if any of you all are teachers, but it takes a special person to have that kind of patience. But I thought I should do my part, so I went ahead and agreed to become a teacher for the Corps. And I started working with the young nurses, and they're a sweet bunch. Any of you ladies ever consider being nurses? Oh, okay. Well, I don't know if you know this. If you decide to become a nurse, something you should probably know. You have to actually live in it's like a bunkhouse. It's a house that's just for the nurses. And you only get, just so you know, because a lot of the girls are really surprised when they show up and they find this out. There is a matron that is in charge of the house. And just so y'all know, if you end up stationed at the Wyoming County Hospital for your training, the girls call the matron the Tank. And she lives up to her name. So you only get one free evening a month. Or I'm sorry, you only get one free evening a week, and you get one weekend free a month.
Wow.
So keep that in mind. Changing your mind? Well, I don't blame you. A lot of the girls really chafe at that. And when we do have the time free, we all will load up into the cars of whoever has the most gas rations, and we'll head up to Rochester or Buffalo and go see a show or go to a USO dance or something like that. You know, these young nurses, they love to go to the USO dances. So we've all been keeping ourselves pretty busy around here. And it'll be nice, though, to have Walt home. Actually be able to move on with our lives. You know, funny thing, I asked my friend Betty. I said, Betty, Tommy's coming home. What do you think you're going to do? What are your plans? And Betty said to me, she said, Phyllis, I have a feeling that about 9 months and 15 minutes after Tommy comes home, I'll be having a baby. Well, I told Betty, I said, well, good for you. I'm not sure I'm going to jump on it quite that quick. Might wait a little longer than 9 months and 15 minutes, but as I said, it'll be nice to have Walt home and actually be able to move on with life. And I'm sure you all are looking forward to that too. Well, after running all that way and everything, I must look a fright. I wouldn't want to show up like this to meet Walt, so I guess I'll go and just freshen up a bit in the ladies' room, and unless y'all have any questions. Yes, ma'am.
Wait, I'm sorry. I don't have a question for you right now. I have a question for you when you're not doing anything.
Do we have any questions for Miss Trinidad?
That's an odd statement, but all right.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Are you sure that he's going to be there when you get down here?
That's a good question. The last communication I had for him was the day before they were set to leave Italy. So I guess there is a possibility that he might not be there, but I mean, they were getting on the ship. So well, now I'm going to be thinking about that the whole ride.
Don't worry about
He's going to be there. Yeah, he will be.
Yes, sir.
You were a teacher for the Army Nurse Corps. Do you ever consider becoming an Army nurse?
You know, I haven't really considered it because as much as I want to do my part for the cause, I currently live with Walt's parents. And that's because Walt's parents are not very healthy. And they have a farm, and they need extra help. And if I were to leave to join the Army Nurse Corps as an actual nurse as opposed to a teacher, they wouldn't have any help. And they're in pretty frail shape. So I'd hate for Walt to get back because he will. He will.
Has Walt been sending money back from his pay?
Oh yes. He sends back his pay. Well, they disperse a part of it to the wives. And he sent me a little bit extra occasionally. And of course, I have my own paycheck coming in. So I've been helping out his parents, of course, doing some of the farm work and then with money. Of course, it's hard to buy much of anything, even if you've got the money. I'm sure you're very aware of these, and ladies, you probably have them all in your handbook too, but gotta have my ration book or I'm not going anywhere. So even having the money doesn't necessarily mean that we're gonna get what we need. Yes, ma'am.
What have some of your other female friends been doing who aren't nurses to help with the war cause?
Well, most of my friends who aren't nurses are doing things like buying war bonds and helping out with the USO and kind of keeping things running while their fellows are gone. Don't know if I know too many of, most of my friends that are nurses are actually nurses at the hospital. I know a couple that joined up. But yeah, most of them are just trying to make it day to day till their fellas come home. A few of them who live closer to Buffalo and Rochester, well, you know, there's lots of industry up there. And with the men gone, they need workers.
Yeah, they
so,
need the factors.
Yeah, so a few of my friends that live up closer to the city have also started working in the factories too. Yes, ma'am.
Was your ration book mailed to you on a monthly basis, or do you have to go someplace and pick it up every so often, or was it the same ration book for every person? Or?
Oh, you have to go and
Here you
you
go,
have to pick up the ration book. If
It's right
you
here.
look,
Oh, you know.
if you look at the back of the ration book, this one's actually my mother's ration book. I needed to pick something up for her. You can see my brother Jack signed it before he left, and then my mama's signature is on the back as well. So you have to go, you have to pick them up, you have to sign for them. I'm surprised you don't know this. I don't know how you've been living for the last 5 years without picking up a ration book, but and if it's black market, I don't want to know. If you've been working with the black market in order to avoid picking up a ration book,
Is there a pretty big black market?
around here, not so much. Of course, you know, there's only certain things that are rationed. Flour, sugar, gasoline, other petroleum products. Rubber's a big one. Nylon. Ladies, I'm sure you all have felt that, not being able to get stockings. You know, some of the ladies at the nurses' school have actually taken their eyeliner pencils and drawn a line up the back of their legs so it looks like they're wearing stockings.
I do that.
Do you? I'm assuming when you go out.
Yeah, I mean,
She's looking for that
Better
sailor.
nothing.
you gotta get your sailors.
Well, and that's why some of the younger girls really like to go to them USO dances.
It's fun. It's a good time.
Yes, ma'am.
So you mentioned that you're living on a farm, you help out. How many people in your area have victory gardens?
Well, I live in a pretty rural area. Most of the people around us are farmers, so they don't necessarily have victory gardens. But a few of my friends that live actually in town have started them. So that's helped out some. Yes, sir.
Why didn't Walt join the Army prior to the U.S. involvement?
Well, I have to say, Walt, when we met, he was working and doing farm work. He wasn't real happy with that. And he'd been thinking about what he wanted to do. And now that he had a new wife, he felt like he needed to get a job that paid a little bit better, had some more prospects. So he decided to join the Army. Now, I've heard that they're going to start this program, and I think they're calling it the GI Bill, where those gentlemen who've gone to war are going to be able to get education. And Walt has actually mentioned that he might someday like to go to medical school, so he might do that when he comes back, but he mainly joined the Army before the war broke out because with a new wife, he felt like he needed to be the breadwinner of the family, so he decided he needed a better job. Yes, ma'am.
Is Walt older than you?
Walt's about 12 years older than me, yes. Yes, ma'am.
So is it your long-term plan to stay and take care of his parents until they die?
Well, I'll tell you. Now, I'm not saying anything bad about living with Walt's parents, but being a newlywed and living with your in-laws is not the best situation ever. So I'm hoping that once Walt gets home and we get settled back in, that we'll be able to get out and get our own place. pretty soon. But then again, that's another reason. It's probably gonna be a little longer than 9 months and 15 minutes before we start a family. Because we've gotta, you know, kind of get out and kind of get established. We didn't have a chance to before the war broke out. We'd only been married about 6 months.
So you're saying you'd follow him to his next duty station, or is he planning on getting out?
Oh, he's planning to get out. He's, as long as they don't deploy him again, as soon as his this is up, he's done, or at least he told me he was done, and he better stick to that. I don't think I'm cut out to be a military wife indefinitely. This has been a hard few years. Yes, ma'am.
What rank did your husband have?
Well, he's an enlisted man, and he's an orderly. But as to like a lieutenant or colonel or anything like that, the ranks don't really run like that in the hospital division. So he's orderly Drennan.
Okay.
But that's, I know what you're asking. I mean, my brother, Jack, who's in the Army Air Corps, he's a lieutenant. But the hospital division works a little differently, yeah. Yes, ma'am?
So, who would you worry about more, your brother or your husband? Because your husband's in the hospital, but your brother's out fighting.
Depending on what letter I got what day. There were times I was pretty worried about Walt, like during the invasion in Normandy. He came in during one of the second waves to help get the boys evacuated. But then I get letters from Jack saying things like, "Don't tell Mama, but I had to fly my plane across the Atlantic by myself without the rest of my squadron because we had, or my plane had issues with the engine and they left without me." So for a while there, until I heard that everything was okay and that he had landed safely, he was definitely the one I was more worried for, flying solo across the Atlantic with those German submarines targeting anything in the sky. Yes, ma'am.
So 9 months and 30 minutes after your husband gets back, do you plan to continue working after your children are born, or is that pretty much the end of the road?
You know, I haven't thought too much about that. I'd like to continue being a nurse. I love what I do. I will say, though, I doubt I can keep working in the surgical wing. It's an almost 24/7 sort of job. So I'll probably have to switch to something that gives me a little more time to be home once we start having a family. But I would like to keep nursing in some respect. But you know, there's lots of different options besides just working in the surgery. Maybe I'll teach. Though as I said, I'm not sure I've got the patience for it. I'll have to ask the girls I've been teaching whether or not I drove them crazy. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Did you ever think about doing anything else besides being a nurse? Or is it a teacher or nursing?
Well, you know, I mainly have thought about being a nurse, and I'll tell you why. I graduated from high school in 1935, and I honestly had no idea what I wanted to do. And there wasn't a guy I was sweet on, so I wasn't planning to get married right away. And my school, and you said you're from the area, so you probably know this, that Delavan, where I went to high school, I live in Warsaw now, Delavan High School offers an extra year of high school. You know, if you're not ready to go out and, you know, start college, if you're a gentleman who's kind of inclined that way, or if you don't know what you want to do, and male or female, you can actually take an extra year of school and take any courses that you're interested in that you hadn't had time for. So I did that. And during that year, several of my friends, including Betty, actually went and got their nursing degree. And they told me all sorts of stories about, they warned me about the situation at the dormitory and all of that, but the actual work sounded so interesting. And I loved the idea of being able to help people. So I finally settled on that's what I was going to do. And honestly, I don't think I've really looked back. And the only reason I was thinking, well, maybe I'll teach is because I did finally, with this, working with the Army Nurse Corps, I got exposed to that idea. So if I'm not a horrible teacher, maybe I'll go that direction. Who knows?
You're great, you thoughtful.
Any other questions before the train gets here? Well, thank you so much. I hope y'all